Hello, everybody. So, this is going to be a video about a lot of random things, basically, just updates on all the New York Times articles I've read recently. Um, so, basically, first of all, I am pretty sure that I was wrong about Ukraine losing for sure because it seems like the Russian military actually is as inept as our propaganda was portraying them to be. Um, See, the thing is, I knew Russia was a kleptocracy, which means that there's so much corruption. You know, when there's when there's money for 80 tanks, there might only be 50 built because the commander or whatever takes a cut. And the reason why I thought that might not matter that much is because I assumed Ukraine is that way also. Like, why wouldn't Ukraine also be a kleptocracy? Like, they have corruption also. But I think the fact that they're being invaded and on defense has made it so that their fight is a lot more personal and legitimate, whereas the Russians are just fighting for money because they were told to. So, and then also, the fact that they've gotten high tech weapons and all that from the West. Um, so it looks like Ukraine is actually doing pretty good, and they might be able to force a peace. I still think they're going to have to give up the East, but still, it's better than, like, it looks like Kiev might not fall in the end, which is crazy, by the way. That's insane. Um, that they managed to hold off a Russian invasion. But we'll see. It's still not over, so. But I was wrong to think that there was for sure no chance. I'm always suspicious of Western propaganda, but there can be some truth to it also. So, anyways, moving on from there, there was I just read an article on the New York Times about Republicans, the Republican Party, and basically how there's always been this struggle between the populist element of the party and the poor element of the party and the less educated element of the party and the pro business elites who are not just pro business but pro like megacorp, pro globalist. Okay, there we go. The globalist elites of the party, um, who believe in, you know, like think George Bush, who was very open to immigration and didn't believe in government regulating hardly anything and was globalist too, believed in free trade and all that. So basically, the MAGA movement and the Tea Party movement before it represented a movement away from the kind of libertarian or classically liberal force or element or faction of the Republican Party. So this article was trying to argue that the MAGA movement has like won and populism is going to rule the right now indefinitely. And I would agree with that because I don't think they'll ever be able to go back to the Paul Ryan style of politics where it's like we're going to slash Medicare, Medicaid, and cut taxes for the rich. They cut taxes for the rich anyway, though. See, that's the funny thing is that they're not actually populist. So they might spew populist rhetoric, but Trump didn't actually help. Like they still did cut Medicare, Medicaid, and they still did cut taxes on the rich, and but free trade on economic policy they did become protectionist. So it's kind of funny because they share that element with the progressives. Not wanting to ship jobs overseas and not wanting free trade between countries, not wanting mass immigration, or even like legal or illegal, not wanting huge imports of foreign workers, skilled or unskilled. Um, and so we're in a really weird moment in American politics, I think, because the Democratic Party has become the party of the educated urban elite who share a lot of qualities with the educated elite of the Republican Party, who have now lost power. Like, you know, Elizabeth Warren has more in common with Lisa Murkowski than with Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? It's a massive difference, a huge difference. Um, and if you want to say like Chuck Schumer, he's way more in common with someone like Mitt Romney than he does with someone like Ted Cruz. So the fact that the more populist part of the party has taken control is in a weird. It puts the Democratic Party in a weird spot because they have a strong progressive populist wing also. And so it's kind of like the Democratic Party now has to kind of champion, like, if anyone's going to, they have to champion trade agreements like the TPP because the Republican Party isn't going to do that anymore. They have to champion, like, libertarian immigration policy, too. So, it's kind of weird. That's why there was another article last week talking about how the Biden administration has been arguing internally about whether or not to repeal Trump's immigration policies. And it's hard to, because there's a record number of immigrants coming to the border, and so it can be, there's a lot of division because the Democratic Party was never the party of open borders. But now, to oppose Trump's shift, to oppose the Republican Party's shift, they almost have to become the party of more libertarian immigration policy. And the urban elite typically supports more libertarian immigration policy. So, yeah, the educated urban elite now rules the Democratic Party, and the uneducated rural lower classes rule the Republican Party. But to me, I still think that the populist element of the GOP is being swindled and is easy to swindle. Like, look at their tax plan and look at the cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Like, they didn't want those things. Their leaders did it anyway, And then they just don't tell them because, the problem with the right, they're in a closed infosphere. Stop This Steal is proof of that, right? Like, they can be made to believe pretty much anything. And especially Trump can make them believe pretty much anything. So it's like you can just say you're doing all these things without actually doing them, which is what they did. So I don't know. It's kind of like, okay, rhetorically maybe, but they still haven't actually made the Republican Party a force for populism. Like, is the Republican Party out there championing? They're not championing any policy. They barely have policy. So, they're mostly just opposition to the Democrats, and they've been playing the culture war games, right? Like talking about schools and things, without going into the economic elements. So I feel like the populist wing, like, they've just been kind of given lip service, I feel like. So how much value do you put on that lip service saying that they rule the party when Trump, it's like, okay, Trump was quote unquote in charge of the party, but he couldn't get his own Congress his own Republican Congress to do the things that he wanted them to do. He couldn't get them to fund the wall. He couldn't get them to, I mean, there's a long list. So he couldn't get them to not cut Medicare and Social Security. So there's a long list of things that Trump wasn't able to actually get them to do, because the problem with the less educated populist group is that they're not involved in the actual specifics, like looking at the laws that are passed and stuff, right? Like, how many MAGA people read the tax bill? You know, probably zero. So it's kind of like they can be kept in an isolated infosphere, and they are, you know. So that would be my retort to the article saying that the MAGA people are in charge. It's like, well, kind of, but it's all that, like, those older Republicans are still, they might give lip service, but they're still the same people with the same beliefs who have more in common with Chuck Schumer than they do with Donald Trump. See, that's the thing, is the Republican senators, you know, like, they have more in common with their Democratic peers than their craziest right-wing peers. So, I would say on cultural issues, though, the Republican Party has really become very forceful and unified. Like, on economic issues, there's still a lot of swindling going on. But on social issues, like on abortion and on Supreme Court stuff, like, wow, I was surprised. You know, Justice Scalia, like, judges used to be approved 99-0, 100-0. Like, even Scalia was approved 99-0. And so I was surprised to see Republicans, some of them, vote against. I was surprised by some of their votes. And I was surprised that the Democrats didn't vote in. I mean, there was so much weird stories going on behind, like, you know, how they got rid of Merrick Garland and didn't appoint him, and then they appointed Gorsuch. So the Democrats had their own reasons for not wanting to vote for Gorsuch and Kavanaugh that were beyond just they're Republican. Whereas to not vote Jackson in is basically like just there's no reason other than just, well, we only want Republican judges, and that's brand new. And most of the senators who are now like that were alive when it wasn't like that at all. So I don't know what happened to them. So yeah, the lack of unity and partisan division is scary. Like, it's crazy. Even a Supreme Court justice, they can't approve. They used to always. But I think a lot of that, too, is because McConnell has long since... Mitch McConnell, like, I think his claim to fame in history is going to be his weaponization of the courts and deciding that the courts need to be politicized. And what I mean is mechanically with appointments and stuff like that, politicizing the appointment of judges and politicizing the courts, which is a horrible thing to do in my opinion. Horrible. Like, we have a rogue court in Louisiana right now. That's just not following any kind of policy or due diligence or procedures, and they're just slapping out these crazy, insane rulings that the Supreme Court is then not challenging. There was a whole article about that, but see, those court articles are a little bit like more complicated and convoluted, so I don't really go into them, like on the channel. So they kind of need their own video. Like, that one needs its own video. So yeah, it was. I think that it's just really funny. Like, I feel like both parties, They're so insistent on opposing each other that they throw each other into weird positions. Like the Democrats now have to be open immigration when they never were before. And Republicans now have to be like pro Medicaid when they never were before. See, but they don't have to be, and they aren't. So that's my whole point. But they have to appear to be, right? Like Trump promised not to cut them. Like that kind of rhetoric is going to be needed now. They're going to have to pretend. They can't go back to Paul Ryan, who was open about libertarian economic policy. So, yeah, I don't know what else there really is to talk about. I suppose that's good enough for one video. Sorry for saying Ukraine would certainly lose. Apparently that's not true. Yeah, so thanks.